welcome to Evil Done Badly, the worst true crime podcast on the internet. Well, we made it. This is episode 20. I honestly have no idea what keeps me going. Nobody listens to this crap, and I'm constantly outwitted and insulted by my arch nemesis, Marty Bass 1976, over on Instagram. He's also taken to tormenting me on YouTube now as well. He's relentless, and he never misses a chance to hurt what's left of my feelings. But if there's one thing I'm good at, it's making a fool of myself, and he can't take that away from me. So I shall continue doing this crummy podcast far into the future, despite his protestations. I'm glad he's around, and I'm also glad the rest of you three faithful listeners are here to share this momentous occasion with us. Thank you all for that. And I have another round of gratitude to dish out before we get started here. And I can't believe it's taken me this long to say this, but here we are. And an extra special thanks to the folks at Apple, Amazon, Google, and Spotify for letting me post my garbage podcast episodes up on their platforms. It's their low standards of quality that let me come on every week and babble out my nonsense. Their willingness to let me come on every week and offend the world's sense of decency does not go unnoticed. These corporations don't have to let me on here, but they do. They're helping me make the internet a more annoying place, and I love them for it. Now let's get to the episode, so grab an extra tall beverage and cue the theme song. This episode of Evil Done Badly is brought to you by the Bourgeois Party of Canada. Our main platform is to eliminate poverty in Canada. We plan to do that by donating all our poor people to other countries, whether they want them or not. We will round up the poor, put them in airplanes, attach used parachutes to them, and drop them over unsuspecting faraway countries. Don't worry about them ever coming back. We've accounted for that possibility. We'll be wiping their memory banks before we send them. They won't know who they are or where they came from. Finders keepers. We will eliminate poverty in Canada, and the poor get a free one-way trip to Cambodia. Win-win. Bums away. Vote bourgeois today. Gee whiz. Whoever writes these commercials is really good. Some huge company should hire this guy and pay him a lot of money to write their ads. He should also get a corner office and a private bathroom. He's quite talented. And, as always, sign up to the Wide World of Paranormal Investigations group on Facebook. They've been one of our biggest supporters from the beginning and are still here at our 20th terrible episode. Thanks again, gang. I wasn't sure what I wanted to cover for this stupendous 20th episode, so I put it to a vote, and I was overwhelmed with a grand total of 3 votes, and it was unanimous. It's hard to argue with that kind of dominance, so that's what we're going to go with. Now, let's get this crazy started and delve into the depths of depravity with a guy who needs no introduction and never actually killed anybody, but he's still a big old cunt. Hold on to your arse. Let's talk about Charles Manson. You may have heard of him. Mr. Manson was born a little bastard in 1934. He was briefly a nameless child, but he eventually wound up being named Charlie, and he took the last name of a guy his mom was banging at the time. His last name was Maddox, and his full name was Charles Mills Maddox. His mom once traded him for a jug of beer, but his uncle went and retrieved him from the waitress who bartered for him a few days later. Now, right here, if that uncle hadn't gone and got him back, who knows what would have happened to old Charlie? He might have been eaten by sewer people, or he might have gone on to win the Nobel Peace Prize. We just don't know. If this uncle hadn't gone and got him back, this story may have ended completely differently. all we can be sure of is that it all added up to him being a complete fuckhead in 1969. I blame the uncle. Since she was unable to sell Charlie, his mom Kathleen would try to donate him to a foster home, but there were no spots available at the time. He would eventually be placed in foster care by the government, but he would escape 10 months later and go back to his mom. She would tell him to fuck off elsewhere, so he went on a bit of a crime spree. He started paying for his rent by doing a series of break-ins and armed robberies. He would be put into and escape from various boys' homes over the next few years. He would steal cars, get caught, and wind up in a minimum security, all grown-up prison when he was 17. He was about a month away from parole when he decided he wanted to rape another inmate while holding a razor blade to his throat. He was then transferred to a different reformatory and declared dangerous. Yep, sounds about right. But I guess he wasn't that dangerous because he got out of prison a bit later and stole some more cars and did some more burglaries. He got a 10-year stint of probation for trying to cash a forged check. Now, probation's pretty good. You know, you don't actually have to go to prison for that. And as long as you can keep your nose clean. But he would fuck this up by stealing a car and trying to pimp out his wife and another girl in Texas. So he wound up having to serve his 10-year sentence. That's a terrible deal. Over the course of his sentence, he would learn to play steel guitar and dabble in Scientology. He would use these skills later when he was assembling his tribe. Now, Scientologists, they're a bit of a zany bunch, and I think there's going to be an episode or two in there somewhere. I mean, there's some weird shit going on there. That's definitely evil done badly material. Overall, though, Charlie was in and out of prison, married a couple times, became a father and a pimp, and by the time he was 32, he had spent more than half of his life behind some sort of bars. Yes, he was an all-around piece of shit, but they could not keep him locked up forever. Old Charlie was scheduled for release from prison on March 21st, 1967, and he asked if he could just live there forever. And they said no. They were tired of feeding him, and they needed his bed to stick some other deadbeat in. So, upon his release, Charlie was allowed to move to San Francisco, and he made his way around by panhandling. He would befriend a university graduate named Mary Brunner, and move into her apartment. He allegedly said something like, "Hey Mary, you mind if I bring some other chicks around?" And she said, "No, I don't want you to do that." And he kept it up, and he repeated this procedure a bunch of times. And before Mary knew it, she was sharing her apartment with Charlie and 17 other women. So, as you can tell, Charlie must have been fucking adorable and very persuasive. In 1967 California, the hippie movement was in full swing, and Charlie used his charisma and Scientological ramblings to help him gain followers, mostly female ones, because he was so fucking adorable. His family was taking shape, and he was their ugly, sexy guru. They hippified an old school bus and started driving it up and down the West Coast, spreading the peace, love, and body odor. Can you imagine how rank that bus was? Bunch of hairy, sweaty, hairy people living in it for weeks on end in the hot, hot sun? You could get a whiff of these people from Washington to Mexico. Sheesh. Despite the stench, when they returned to San Francisco, the group had grown considerably. Now, in 1968, Dennis Wilson of the Beach Boys. The ultra popular silly pop band from back then. He struck up a friendship with Charlie Manson and his friends. Accounts vary on how this relationship came about, but one theory is that Dennis picked up a couple of hitchhikers one night on the way home from a recording session. These were a couple of Manson's female followers. He brought them back to his place for a few hours of smelly entertainment. So they leave and he goes about his business, and the next day he arrives back from the studio with Manson already inside his house with about a dozen of his followers. So Dennis here is a little shook up by the whole thing, but Manson persuades him that he means him no harm and actually bows down to him and starts kissing Dennis's feet. The other story goes that Manson and Dennis met at a house in San Francisco where Charlie went to buy some weed. He talked Dennis into giving him his address, and Dennis told him to drop by if he was ever in the area. Now, that's a way more mundane explanation, and that's supposedly from Manson himself, so take it for what it's worth. I enjoy the explanation where Dennis just picked up a couple of skanks on the side of the road and then Charlie and his friends did a little B&E at his place. I'm gonna go with that one. That's the kind of true crime reporting we do here at Evil Done Badly. Facts are, pretty flexible around here. Whatever happened, in the next 6 months, Dennis Wilson's house would become a home for Charlie and over 24 of his friends. It would cost Dennis about $100,000 in 60s money to keep these people at his house. Now, most of that $100,000 went to medical bills to get the gonorrhea off of them. Yeah. Fun stuff. So, now that he's all freshened up, Charlie would convince Dennis that he was a musician too. Dennis and his friends were impressed with Manson's lifestyle and eventually paid for studio time so Charlie could get his half-baked garbage down on tape. Yes, I realize the irony here. If there's anyone on Earth who shouldn't be criticizing other people's creative talent, it's me, your hapless host, Dick. But it's Charles Manson and it's fucking terrible. Ever since Guns N' Roses snuck that hidden track onto the spaghetti incident, I fucking hated Charles Manson music. I love Guns N' Roses, but that's a shitty album and an even shittier song. Moving on. One of Dennis's friends, who was enamored by Charlie's philosophy, just happens to be a guy who owns a house. This house will be important later because it would soon after be rented to actress Sharon Tate and her husband, director Roman Polanski. Manson was especially interested in Dennis's friend, Terry Melcher, who was a producer at Columbia Records and owned a house. Terry was one of the few who saw through Charlie's creepy, dumb-looking facade and never trusted the weaselly little bastard from the beginning. Melcher reluctantly gave him an audition, but it rejected him outright. Melcher was also responsible for vetoing a documentary that was supposedly going to be made about Manson and his family. Now, he vetoed it based on he witnessed an altercation between Manson and some other smelly guy, and he just said, fuck this, I'm not making a documentary about these two smelly people fighting. These days, that sort of thing would be all over reality TV. Yeah, that'd be great. But back then, they said, nope, that's a bad look. We're not going to do it. I have no idea how this Manson fucker got involved with all these famous people. He was as sketchy as they get. I guess famous people didn't have to worry about being cancelled in the late 60s like they do now. I mean, nowadays, a celebrity can't accidentally email a dick pic to their friend's mom without destroying their whole fucking career. This Dennis guy was running the world's stinkiest bed and breakfast full of criminals, and no one batted an eyelash. There you go. Dennis's career would have been fine. Dennis would, however, wish to end his relationship with Manson and his fellow nutjobs after Manson pulled a knife on one of Dennis's sound engineers. And Dennis dealt with this in the most manly way possible. He ran away. The lease soon expired, and evicting Manson and his cronies was left for someone else to deal with. And as an added fuck you to Manson, Dennis reworked one of Manson's songs and took sole credit for it. Charlie was not happy with how that all panned out and threatened Dennis and his family's well-being. Dennis felt justified in stealing Manson's song because of all the money he wasted looking after these fucktards for the last 6 months. I think that was, Charlie got off easy there. So Charlie's dreams of superstardom were crushed, and he was angry and bitter. Now, I've had my dreams of superstardom crushed many times. I'm no longer angry about it, though. I'm a little more indifferent these days. So, Charlie and the gang get evicted, and they take up residence at the Spahn Ranch. It was a 55-acre farm that was originally used for shooting Western movies, back when they were the action-packed movie blockbusters of the day. By the time Charlie found the place, 80-year-old George Spahn used it primarily as a horse rental business. He was pretty much blind and let the Manson family live there in exchange for labor. I hope this is not one of those cases where your eyes give out and your other senses kick into high gear. Poor George would have had to spend all his time smelling body odor and horse manure in 4K. Christ, that's fucking nasty. That's a bad deal for old George. However, Charlie would sweeten the deal a bit and uphold his end of the bargain by regularly sending his female followers to dust off old George's equipment and get his engine started. From what I can tell, George was a spry 80-year-old blind guy. So, he was getting something out of it. Now, Charlie's out living at his ranch. He's got a place to stay. All his friends are there. The weather is beautiful, and he's got his own little harem going. He's got all the horse milk he can drink, and things are looking good. Sounds lovely, don't it? You know what's not on that list, though? A recording contract. He's still pissed about that. You know who had a recording contract? Liberace. He put out 70 records and sold millions and millions of copies. I mean, he's no Nana Muscuri, but who is? What was I on about? Right. Record deals. Who else had a record deal? The Beatles had a record deal, and they put out a record called The Beatles. Or better yet, the White Album in 1968. For being drugged out musicians, those two album names are dreadfully uncreative. Now, Charlie had enough creativity for everybody. He got so creative that when he listened to it, he found crap that wasn't even there. He dug so deep into the subliminal side of the record that he decided the underlying message of it was to rise up and kill white people, and in doing so, set off a race war. So the first part of Charlie's devious plan was to make their own best-selling album and load it up with subliminal messages that would turn white people against other white people. He figured he'd get some black people to kill some white people, and that would turn some whites against the blacks and some racist whites against the other non-racist whites. And then, according to the plan, the Black Rebellion would kill off what was left of the honkies. The family would live in a secret bottomless pit in Death Valley they called Yellow Submarine, another Beatles reference, while they waited for the war to blow over. Charlie and his family would then resurface to rule over what was left of the black people. See, according to Charlie, the black people were too dumb to survive on their own and would need him to be their master. You cannot make this shit up. You can't make this shit up because Chuck here already made it up. And it ended really badly for a lot of people. So if you're ever going making shit up, please make up something better than this horrible nonsense. He took the name for his movement, which he called Helter Skelter, from a song title on this White record called, well, Helter Skelter. Apparently, Helter Skelter is just a British way of saying a twirly playground slide. Charlie embraced the hell part of Helter, took it literally, and ran with it. In other words, Charlie blamed the carnage that comes later on, well, Paul McCartney. Charlie lined up another meeting with Terry Melcher so that he could play his new recordings for him. This was going to be the big breakthrough. They could finally get this record pressed so they could start brainwashing everyone while they watched the world slip into madness. They cleaned the house in anticipation for Terry's arrival. Now you can see where this is going. Yup. They got stood up. Terry blew them off, and Charlie was not happy. This whole subtle musical genocide thing was not going to be a quick process. It was going to take a while. So, Charlie gets antsy and takes a trip out to Melcher's house on March 29th, 1969. But Melcher has conveniently moved to Malibu. There, he meets Sharon Tate and her photographer, Shirok Hatami, and the current homeowner, Rudy Altobelli. Manson had successfully creeped them out to the point that Altobelli told him not to disturb his tenants and that he would be leaving the country for more than a year and more or less just fuck off and go away because you're a fucking weirdo. Unbelievably, though, Melcher would actually make 2 trips back to the Spahn Ranch to hear Charlie and his angels sing. Melcher even conned someone else to come along with a mobile recording unit, probably just to placate Charlie and make him think he had a chance at a record deal. This would go nowhere fast. Manson decided it would take something more drastic than producing a lousy album to kick off the race war. So on May 18, 1969, he sends one of his flunkies out to rip off a black drug dealer. That would turn out to be noticeably more effective in making people angry. This resulted in the drug dealer threatening to murder everyone at the Spahn Ranch. Charlie says, quote, "Yay, them's fighting words," and, quote, "I love unicorns," and then he runs over and shoots the drug dealer at his apartment. Now, that might actually be a misquote right there. I don't know if Charlie said any of that, but he did run over and shoot the guy. So, Charlie, if you'd like to clarify, I can be reached at evildonebadly@gmail.com. Thanks. Now, when Charlie goes back home and starts watching the news, he sees that the body of a Black Panther was found dumped in L.A. Now, that's a person, not a large black cat. Although, both of which I'm sure would have been quite illegal. So, Charlie starts rubbing his hands together and getting excited. He starts fortifying the ranch, hunkers down, and awaits retaliation from the Black Panthers. But nothing happens. Turns out the drug dealer Charlie shot survived the shooting, and the dead Black Panther was dead due to a totally unrelated matter. So, after about a month of nothing, on July 25th, 1969, Charlie sends 3 family members to the house of a mutual acquaintance, Gary Hinman. Apparently, Gary was supposedly the recent recipient of a $21,000 inheritance. So, Charlie thought Gary had a few bucks lying around, and figured it would be better if it was lying around Charlie's house than around Gary's. Depending on who you ask, these people were sent to rob Gary, or these people were just sent to, well, rob and kill Gary. They would hold Gary hostage for 2 days before Bobby Beausoleil would stab him to death. One of the members would write the words "political pig" on the wall in Hinman's blood, along with a Black Panther symbol. See what they did there? They're trying to make it look like a racially motivated killing in order to stir up disorder. I don't think they found Hinman's money, though. Beausoleil would be arrested on August 6th. Now, this sneaky little master criminal was caught driving Hinman's car with the murder weapon inside. Yeah. And 2 days later, Manson would claim that, quote, now is the time for helter skelter, end quote. On August 8th, Manson directed 4 family members, 1 dude and 3 girls, to the house where Melcher used to live to, quote, destroy everyone inside it as gruesome as you can, end quote. He put the dude, Watson, in charge of being gruesome. Inside the house at the time were Sharon Tate, Jay Sebring, Wojciech Frykowski, and Abigail Folger of coffee fame. Tate was 8 months pregnant, and Roman Polanski was off shooting a movie in London. When they got to the Tate house, Watson climbed a pole and cut the phone lines. While they were scoping out a way into the house, an automobile slowly approached. It was 18-year-old Stephen Perron in his mom's Rambler. Watson jumped in front of the car, and while Stephen begged for his life, Watson slashed him with a knife and shot him in the torso 4 times. Stephen would not survive. He would be the family's second fatality. With that taken care of, they went back to trying to find a way in. Watson would eventually cut a window screen and make his way inside. He then let the girls in through the front door. Now, I don't know why these prissy bitches couldn't be bothered climbing through the window too, but I guess it was the chivalrous thing to do back in the day. Whatever. So Watson kicks off the madness by booting a sleeping Frykowski in the face and yelling, quote, I'm the devil and I'm here to do the devil's business, end quote. They gathered the other 3 occupants and started tying them up. Sebring would protest the family's treatment of the pregnant Tate, and Watson would lose his patience and shoot him. As he lay bleeding on the ground, Watson would stab him 7 times. Frykowski would escape from his bonds and get stabbed repeatedly in the legs by the girl who was supposed to be keeping an eye on him. He would make it to the porch in a vain attempt to escape. Watson joined in the chase and beat him over the head with the gun multiple times before shooting him twice. Frykowski was a fucking trooper. He kept on crawling across the lawn to get away from Watson, who finally subdued him and finished him off with a barrage of stabbing. In total, Frykowski had been stabbed 51 times. Frykowski, you are one tough son of a bitch. And the rest of you, what a bunch of cunts you guys are. Abigail Folger gave the group $70 and then tried to escape to the pool area. She was tackled on the front by one of the girls and then stabbed 28 times, eventually being killed by Watson. Back inside the mansion, Tate would beg to be left alive long enough to have her baby. It didn't change any of their minds as they proceeded to stab her 16 times. They would write the word pig on the front door in Sharon's blood as they fled the scene. They ditched the bloody clothes and weapons in the hills on the way home. Now, the next night, 6 family members, including the 4 from the previous night's murders, and Charlie went to the house of Leno LaBianca and his wife Rosemary. Charlie was displeased with how clumsily last night's killings went down, so he came along to supervise. Watson complained about how lousy the weapons they used were, so this time they brought along a chrome-plated bayonet. Accounts vary about how it got started, but it wound up with both the LaBiancas tied up with pillowcases over their heads. The pillowcases were secured in place with lamp cords. They separated the pair, and Watson started stabbing Leno while two girls were watching over Rosemary in the bedroom. While Mr. LaBianca was lying on the floor incapacitated, Watson heard a commotion in the bedroom. The commotion was brave Mrs. LaBianca fending off the two girls with the lamp that was attached to the cord that was tied around her neck. You fucking give it to him, Rosemary. Fuck yeah. But, alas, dear Watson comes along and starts poking her with the bayonet, and her spirited resistance would be shut down. Watson ordered the two girls to keep stabbing her while he went back and finished off Leno. In total, he stabbed Leno 12 times and carved the word war into his abdomen. Examiners would find 41 stab wounds on Rosemary's body, many of which were done post-mortem. Watson then wiped off the blade of the bayonet and, for some reason, hopped in and had his monthly shower. While he was freshening up, the girls wrote the words "Rise," "Death to Pigs," and "Helter-Skelter" around the house in the LaBianca's blood. Yes, they misspelled helter. And they wrote down Helter. I'm not just mispronouncing it. Now, before they left, one of the girls poked 14 holes in Mr. LaBianca with a carving fork and left it sticking out of his stomach. She also left a steak knife sticking out of his throat. So, this murder went down way smoother than the last one. But there's one other murder from that night that you don't often hear about. Because it never happened. See, Charlie originally took 6 cultists with him and dropped 3 of them off at the LaBianca house. Charlie had taken the other members to the apartment of an actor friend of one of the girls with instructions to kill him. He was hoping for 2 simultaneous sets of killings. This second set didn't go as planned, or at all for that matter. The girl who was the friend of the man they were supposed to kill got cold feet and deliberately sabotaged the murder by knocking on the door of the wrong apartment. When a stranger answered the door, they said, well, fuck it, and they went home. But not before one of them took a shit in the stairwell. So at least there's that. They accomplished something. They shat in the stairwell. On August 9th, the Polanski's housekeeper discovered the bloodbath at the residence, and on August 10th, the LaBiancas were found by their children. On August 12th, the press had dismissed any chance that the two incidences were related. Seems logical, right? I don't know how much information they had at the time, but how the fuck do you not put these two cases together? Anyway, they arrested the Manson family, all 26 of them, on August 16th. They arrested them for stealing Volkswagens and converting them to doom buggies. Yep. It's almost as bad. So they're in jail, and then they're let go. They're let go because of some clerical error fucking up the dates on the warrant, so they could no longer be detained. So they all go free, and the police are no closer to cracking the cases. All they've got to go on so far is based on the writings at the crime scenes is that someone really likes the Beatles. Acting independently, both teams of detectives didn't really make any progress on either case, and it was looking kind of dismal. But on November 6th, resident Mansonite Susan Atkins couldn't keep her trap shut. She was imprisoned on the Hinman murder that we discussed earlier and told her bunkmate that she had killed Tate. She said that, quote, we wanted to do a crime that would shock the world and have to stand up and take notice, end quote. It's only fitting that Susan would be the one to shit all over Manson's plan, because she was the one who took the shit on the stairwell earlier. I thought that was a neat coincidence. So the LA Sheriff's Office starts snooping around and looking into it. They interview a local gang member that was known to have some ties to Manson. And he flat out says Manson told him he was the mastermind behind all the murders, okay? That was easy. So with all this new info, they start rounding up the cult members who they thought were responsible for the crimes and start gathering physical evidence to use against them. Fingerprints started matching up. A 10-year-old boy found Watson's gun. Bloody clothing was discovered. And Atkins' misplaced knife was found in the Polanski's couch. Ballistics tests were conducted, linking the gun to various crime scenes, and basically it all came together once Atkins pointed them in the right direction. So these stupid cunts are caught, and now the process of sorting out this whole clusterfuck begins. Sounds like the trial was a little wacky. The trial begins on June 5th, 1970. Linda Kasabian was the star witness because she had been present during the Tate murders. She didn't take part in the killing, though. She was more of a lookout on the outside of the mansion and was granted immunity in exchange for selling the other fuckers down the river. Manson asked to be his own lawyer, but he wasn't making any sense and was told he couldn't do it. He managed to make enough sense, though, to get the judge replaced. I have no idea how he pulled that off. In July, when it came time for Manson to testify, he showed up to the court with an X carved into his forehead and told everyone he was incompetent and could not defend himself. The X represented his withdrawal from the world. All the family members would subsequently carve X's into their foreheads to show they were also incompetent. Manson's X would ultimately morph into a swastika. Family members started holding candlelight vigils outside the courthouse with knives strapped to themselves. Now that's Manson family members, not victim family members. This is just more nut jobs. Apparently, it was all totally illegal, so that's not a big deal. When Charlie tried to attack the judge because of his objection to not being able to cross-examine someone, the female members present stood up and started chanting in Latin. Legend has it that the judge started wearing a gun to work after that incident. Potential witnesses for the prosecution started facing increasing pressure and threats. In one case, Paul Watkins was burned badly in a suspicious van fire, and one girl was fed an LSD-laced hamburger that resulted in hospitalization. On November 16th, the prosecution rested. They went home, had some tea, took a nice nap to escape from the silliness of the courtroom. 3 days later, the defense rested as well, without calling a single witness. Now, Manson's 3 co-defendants, these 3 girls, they all went bonkers. They wanted to be called to testify so that they could assume all responsibility for the murders and absolve Charlie from any wrongdoing. Everyone saw right through that, though, and knew that Chuck there was pulling all the strings, so that didn't fly. Charlie did, however, get to testify himself. He got to stand up there for a whole hour and plead his case, without the jury present. The jurors were told to leave because Charlie was full of shit and would probably just throw his co-defendants under the bus. I have no idea why the jury wasn't allowed to see his buffoonery, but I'm no lawyer guy. If they had gotten to stay, they would have heard such nuggets as, quote, "The music is telling the youth to rise up against the establishment," and, quote, "I didn't write the music, why blame it on me," end quote. Whatever, Charlie. It takes 10 days of deliberations, but on January 25th, 1971, the jury fined all 4 guilty of a bunch of murders and sentenced them to death. On an unfortunate note, California would abolish the death penalty in 1972, and all their death sentences would be commuted to life in prison. These cunts are going to be sucking back taxpayer money for a long time. I mean, they were all still quite young when this happened. Charlie himself was only 36, and most of the rest of them were way younger than that. So, Charlie's in jail, and he's a model prisoner who's only accumulated about 108 serious violations in the last 40 years. He's shown how sorry he is by expressing no remorse whatsoever about the murders. He's denied parole 12 times and would have been told to fuck off again in 2027 if he didn't kick the bucket in November of 2017 of natural causes. I hope that means he was hung upside down and screwed to death with an electric ice auger. But that's unlikely. I don't see there being much of a market for electric ice augers in California. Everyone else involved with the case is either dead or in jail hopelessly awaiting their next parole hearing. As far as I know, none of them have ever been released, but have all tried to. Many, many multiples of times. And whatever happened to poor Dennis Wilson? Well, poor Dennis Wilson was so traumatized by the whole thing, he refused to testify against him and feared for his family's safety. He felt an immense guilt about introducing Manson to his Hollywood friends. He would develop some nasty drinking and drug habits to help deal with the emotional weight he was bearing. He was most likely receiving death threats from the family after the trial and struggled to keep up with the demands of being a drummer in a band that was almost as popular as Liberace. Dennis would die at 39 in a tragic drinking and diving accident at Marina del Rey, and he was buried at sea. When Charlie bit the dust, at least 4 people were making claims to his remains. A court eventually ruled in favor of someone claiming to be Charlie's grandson, as opposed to the people who claimed to be his son, or people who claimed that they had the true will and testament of Charles Manson. He spent 4 months in a cooler while they sorted it out, and in the end he had a good Christian funeral and was cremated. He was scattered on a California hillside and is probably still blowing around out there somewhere. The battle is still on to decide who will get his estate, which looks to me to be nothing more than a few smelly trinkets and the rights to his shitty, crappy fucking music. And there you have it! A super big 20th episode of Evil Done Badly, the worst true crime podcast on the internet, is in the bag. Thanks to everyone who has joined us on this adventure into the terrible side of true crime. I hope you'll be back next week as we delve into another crazy case, which I haven't decided on yet. So, get your suggestions in now by email at evildonebadly@gmail.com or over on Instagram at evildonebadly. Thanks again for listening. See you next time on Evil Done Badly, the worst true crime podcast on the internet. Bye-bye. Oh, hold on a second. I just got a listener question pop up on the old social media. Agnes Ravenschlock from Alaska writes, "Hey, 20 is a nice round number. Can you stop now, please?" And to that I say, yes, 20 is a nice round number. I will give you that. But you know what is a nicer, rounder number, Agnes? 100. Ask me again after episode 100, and I'll get back to you. Thanks for writing in, Agnes. See y'all later.